welcome to Financial Plan. And over the next 30 minutes, we'll be talking about a very interesting aspect of financial planning, probably the genesis and the most important aspect of planning your finances. To talk about that, we have with us a very special guest, Feroz Aziz of Anand Rathi. Thanks, Feroz, for coming by today. Feroz, we talked about this before we started doing this show a few minutes ago, where we discussed how setting your goals was the most important cornerstone of any sort of financial planning. So let's talk about that in a little more detail, right? Firstly, you've got to tell me, why is goal setting important? Or what is goal setting? Let's start by what is goal setting?
See, goal setting is a very fundamental, commonsensical concept of trying to say if you have to start managing anything, you need to have an objective or goal, which are synonymous. Once you have a goal, then you will be able to develop a strategy to meet your goal, implement the strategy, and you will have something to measure yourself against. So monitoring becomes far more simpler, and it has a relative scale of targets and actuals. So goal setting is the management process, and is the first step of management process, without which no management is possible.
So you've got to be objective, and I guess that is what's crucial to get any plan to get any plan going for you.
Absolutely. Actually, like we run businesses or as professions, every year as a professional, you have KRAs and you have targets given to you in terms of different parameters. Similarly, anything in life, if you want to actually increase the chance of achieving it, you need to actually set yourself an objective.
Right. So coming back to the importance of setting goals, I believe there's enough and more research out there that indicates that once you've got your goals in place, the chances of meeting success is probably going to only increase.
Absolutely. Actually, one very, very interesting survey, which actually followed through for 30 years to find out the impact of goal setting, was done by Harvard Business School, where they found out that 83% of human beings don't actually have financial goals. 14% have them in their mind, but not laid down as specifically as it could be. There was just about 3% of the people who actually had clearly defined specific goals. Then Harvard Business School followed through this research. After 30 years, found out that these 3% of the people who were perfect in their goal setting made 10 times more the wealth than the other 83% who had it so vague and not listed down at all. So this clearly says that if you have a target, enhancing the probability of the target and meeting it becomes so much more simpler.
So the first important rule is put your goals down. You've got to note them down. It cannot just be in your head.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Also, Feroz, goals are evolving, I'd imagine, right? At different times in your life, your goals change, your priorities change.
Correct.
How often would you review your goals, A? And B, is there any mechanism in which you determine a timeline, or you put aside what is actionable, what is not? Because some goals might take immediate action, others might not require to be attended for a very long time to come.
Absolutely. So then after you've been very clear that goal setting is definitely the first step and the first baby and the most important step, and half job is done if you have goals, then comes the nuances of how to set it and what are the monitoring mechanisms. The third or the second biggest advantage of having a goal is in this dynamic world where things are changing from an environment, macroeconomic environment, political environment, and investment environment. If you have a target and an actual, you will be able to monitor it and be able to course correct if it's not as envisaged. So course correction becomes very easy when you have targets and actuals. That's a very big advantage. Okay. So once you know where you have to go, and if you're not getting there, then you'll have to pick another strategy to be able to meet your goal. So I think you're absolutely right that it's very important to monitor and make corrective actions. It's not about making mistakes. Everybody does mistakes in every walk of life. It's about correcting them sooner than later, which is going to cost you. And this mechanism of goal setting, rather than just buying products from different people, will help you course correct far more efficiently, and it'll be lesser expensive to make mistakes.
Right, so that's the review part of it, right? But goals are always evolving as well, right, Feroz?
Absolutely.
I mean, how does one do that? It's not like your goals are cast in stone. Can you add goals? Can you subtract goals as you go through life?
Absolutely. One is that the external environment is dynamic,
right.
And so is your internal finances very dynamic. What you envisaged you would earn is different than what you earn 10 years from now. And your goals, your aspirations, your lifestyle upgrades would change. So, rightly pointed out that you will actually make changes in this life cycle into the goals from a short-term perspective, medium-term perspective, long-term perspective. And your aspirations to upgrade your lifestyle have to be encompassed in that goal setting, and it has to be a moving process. It's not an digital process where you do it, shut it and forget it. You have to also monitor it from your internal perspective.
Feroz, are aspirations the same as goals? Because I guess there would be a very thin line between the two, right? I mean, dreaming of having a jet cannot really be a goal if you're a middle-class employee.
Absolutely. I think you've said it right.
Yeah.
What distinguishes between a huge aspiration to a goal is goals are more realistic, more specific. Those are dreams, which of course, if God is kind, they get fulfilled. But I think not confusing the dreams and your aspirations to goals. Goals brings more realistic nature, more reality, more time-bound, more input-driven. What is the kind of money I need to save to meet the goal? Now, if I have an aspiration to buy a private jet, I might not be able to save for it. And if I work backwards, so what am I need to save? I might have to save 10 times my salary today. That becomes difficult. So dreams and aspirations are on one side. Goals are more specific, more time-bound and realistic.
How important is reviewing these goals? Because you alluded to that in your previous answer where you said you can go back and take a corrective action. But how often does one have to review goals? Do you review goals annually? Do you review goals when your salary goes up or goes down, when you lose your job, maybe get a new job? How often is it done? Or when you get married, when you have a child, is that done as frequently or less frequently? What's the best way?
I think there are 2-3 things which actually trigger a change in your goals. One is an additional responsibility in the form of a dependent.
Okay.
Becomes a very important milestone to review your goals. Second, if there is any expense or income changing by more than 10%, okay, you need to review your goals again. Okay, if you have more aspirations and if your life changes in terms of one, for example, if somebody is working in the initial phase and then plans for higher education, then those are triggers where you're actually changing your path of life which you thought. So these are the 3 important reasons why you'll have to review your goal and make changes to them.
You know, when you review your goal and you realize that in some cases you're probably behind schedule or behind plan, what happens then? Do you start saving more or do you, of course, increase your timeline?
See, you can do both. But ideally, the first thing which is in your control is discretionary spending.
Okay.
If I would see that my goals are being not met, and if I envisage that they will not be met in time, I will have to look at my expense first, and then see which are the discretionary spending and cut those down, for which you will have to have a clear record of your expense over the years. So that becomes an important data point for you to be understanding where are you being more flamboyant in discretionary spending. And the second thing is, if goals can be moved ahead, then they should be moved ahead. But education and marriage, for example, is very difficult.
Flexible in terms of moving ahead. What about setting deadlines? How important is it to put a timeline to your goals? Because, I mean, sure, you can say you want a house or you want to go on holiday, but I guess everything comes with a timeline, right?
Absolutely. I think timeline is the most important thing, because if there's nothing casted in stone that you will meet the goal or the money required to meet the goal exactly on that specific day. But no targets in life are casted in stone. So not having them might not make sense. So you're very right that we need to have a time-bound kind of a goal rather than a very superficial, anytime kind of a goal. So classifying them short-term, near-term and medium-term, and being more specific in terms of each of them, what is the date you want them to be met, is a good start point. And then you might overshoot it by 6 months or a year, but that doesn't matter. But having a timeline is very critical.
Do most people you meet, Feroz, have a goal set out? Or more often than not, that's the first thing that you got to train people to do?
See, actually,
this doesn't come very naturally to you, right? I mean, you would not think of quantifying goals and putting it down with every passing week or month or year.
Yeah, actually, if you meet so many people, they don't have a clearly laid out goal. That's exactly why a financial planner is very critical, because he forces you to think and spend some time on this. Because see, it's very important that this money you're earning helps you meet your goals. Otherwise, it's infructuous money if it doesn't help you meet your goals.
And so, I think most of us would have qualitative goals, right? It's very tough to put a number to your goals.
See, I would disagree that it's actually tough. It is your inertia to actually sit down over a weekend and put that through. Actually, it's a couple of hours job if you actually are determined to actually finish it. So I would say it's not so tough. You need some push, external push from a planner or a show like this, which can actually trigger a thought process and starts from there.
All right, so to sum that up, putting your goals down is probably the most important aspect of financial planning. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll tell you how you need to quantify these goals, so stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Financial Planner, and in the previous segment we were talking about why goal setting is important, and now we'll tell you how you set out those goals. Firoz, we told our viewers of why goal setting is a cornerstone of financial planning. Let's talk about how does one classify goals to begin with?
See, actually, if you've classified them right, then you will be more specific. If you have them ambiguous, then it becomes very difficult to put numbers to it. So firstly, classification of goals could be into three categories. One is growing your money, growing capital, which is the more monetary, tangible goals, protecting it and making risks come down, all of them. And then you have transmitting this wealth to the next generation. So these are the three classifications or heads under which there will be goals. Now you have to pick up from all these three heads: near-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. Right? Now, for example, growth and the money goals. Very important. In the short term, you'll have to have a contingency fund. See, most often than not, people don't have enough savings if there's an eventuality like a job loss. So it's said that if you have a 3-month salary parked aside to mitigate this risk of loss of a job, it's a very important short-term goal. If you don't have this planned, your behavior at workplace will be a little fearful. So once you have a 3-month salary as your backup and a contingency fund, that's an example of a short-term goal which helps you grow your money.
Apart from that, what others feature in the short-term sort of targets or short-term goals that you'd have, apart from your contingency fund, which clearly is the most important?
Correct. So for example, in the short-term category, if you want to save for a holiday, it becomes
it's not just job loss, it's also a holiday that you can save for, right?
Absolutely. There's something positive, there's something negative. So
it's one for one.
One for one, absolutely. So you save for a holiday. It's a short-term goal, right? You don't want to plan a holiday 5 years from now, right? People want it fast. Today's generation actually loves experiences rather than buying products. So I think in your financial plan, if you don't have money saved up for experiences which you will have with your friends or family, I think that'll be half job done again. So saving for a holiday could be another example of a short-term goal. From the protection category, what could be a short-term goal? Getting yourself insured on the health side. Because it's seen that in India, medical inflation, medical expenses, who would not need sophisticated medical care? That's inflated at 16-17% in India. So that has to be protected by using health insurance. So that's a short-term protection goal. Now, if I give you an example of short-term transmission goal, which is to transmit wealth, creating a will. Most often than not, people neglect this aspect. Not creating a will and leaving it undone is a very, very bad thing to do. So creating a will is a short-term, and nobody can stop you create a will irrespective of your age. That's a short-term, a 6-month target that you should have a well-planned will. Making sure that your nominees synchronize with your investments is also a short-term goal.
What about medium-term goals, Firoz? What features in the list, and what's the kind of timeline when you talk about a medium-term goal? Short-term, we've said, is 1 year.
Correct. So I think anywhere between 2 to 5 years is a medium-term goal. The classic examples of medium-term goals could be buying a car. For example, saving for the down payment of a car becomes a medium-term goal. Another medium-term goal could be higher education, if you wish to pursue it. Quite a few people today work after they've got their graduation, and post-graduation is undone. Saving up for that could be and the period where you would have to spend money apart from the education could be a medium-term goal. The other medium-term goal, depending on the age of a person and dependence age, could be even a wedding for himself or his child if he is on the later phase of his life. So these could be the medium-term goals. Anything ranging between 2 to 5 years, I would classify them as medium-term goals. And these are some things which you'll have to keep your eye on because they will require far more monitoring because you don't have a leeway as much as you would have in the long-term category.
What about long-term goals? And buying a home would probably be the top of the list for most aspiring Indians, right?
Correct, absolutely. And fortunately, what's happening is as you evolve, having a home and the down payment for that, for the fact that it is a larger portion of one's wealth, becomes an important long-term goal. The other very important long-term goal, which people don't think of too much, especially in the younger age, is retirement. Because other goals, like for example, child's marriage or his education or her education, might just end up being sponsored by the kid itself. But retirement, unfortunately, it's you who'll have to take the burden of it. And that's where there's maximum risk of price rise, inflation. So retirement is a long-term goal. Getting yourself a home and the down payment could be an example of a long-term goal, which could be 8, 10 years, 5 years, 7 years, upwards of that.
Right, Feroze, so across ages and across probably brackets of wealth, these goals are more or less uniform and common, fair to say that?
See, firstly, you will have to, these are goals which are common to most of us.
Right.
Beyond this, somebody might have a laundry list of other goals, but making sure that this category A is taken care of.
Bare minimum, to say the least, that
Absolutely.
needs to be fulfilled. Also, you did indicate that your long-term goal could be a little more flexible in terms of time. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Because see, what happens is, in the long-term goals, you have one very important phenomena working for you. The compounding factor does not work in the short run. See, if you've made smaller investments for your retirement, that will be good enough for you to make good your retirement. And if you're planning for 25 years of retirement, post 25 years, even if it takes 26 years, it's not going to be so difficult for you to manage working another year. So because of two factors, because you have 25 years or 10 years or 20 years, you might be able to add a couple of years. But on a near-term goal, if it's a 2-year goal, moving it 3 years and 4 years is going to be a tougher task. And the second most important thing is power of compounding, which is the most important aspect of finance, will come to your rescue in the longer term category.
On that note, we'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll tell you how you monetize these goals. So stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Financial Planner, and this is in the last segment. We'll talk about how you're going to monetize these goals that we've just talked about. Feroze, we've already told our viewers why goal setting is important. How do you break and classify your goals into short, medium, and long term? Let's talk about how you monetize these goals. But before we go into that, we all know that money today is not worth the same tomorrow, and that's because of inflation. I believe you guys have done a research and analysis on what destruction inflation can do and why it's so important in setting out a financial plan or setting your goals out.
Absolutely. Inflation, which is not visible to naked eye on a daily basis, actually becomes the biggest killer of money's value, right? Over long periods of time, we put together last 30 years inflation, and it was known that 100 rupee has deteriorated itself to 5 rupees as per government's inflation in 30 years. That's like 95% of the value of that money lost over 30 years. So not addressing this problem will be a very, very scary exercise to meet your goals at that point in time. So inflation, then we broke it down. Every goal has a different inflation number.
Because of a different timeline.
Different timeline, and also because, like for example, education has marginally higher inflation than the government's published inflation. Because as a society, there is demand for education going up as we progress in the literacy kind of curve. So inflation, assuming 5% inflation, 6% inflation on education, and you might fall short of half your money your child might need to get himself educated. So inflation being specific, so we put a research together where education inflation, we checked the inflation on banquets to get a child married. How is it inflated? Travel has inflated at about 11%. So making sure that your goals have specific inflation is critical. Right? And trying to take an aggressive number on inflation is a safer thing to do.
How do you determine what that inflation level is going to be? So for a child's wedding, for health, like you said, that goes at about 16-70%, or for a holiday, how do we assign an inflation value? It's obviously not what the RBI gives us on a monthly basis, right?
Absolutely not.
Because that would be food and fuel.
Correct, absolutely. Large portion of that, like you rightly pointed out, is food and fuel, but it's not education as much. So for the important ones, I could tell you what are the inflation numbers as per our study of the last 25 years. Education, which forms a part of most people's financial goals, is inflating at what? 8 to 9%. Consistently over the last 20 years. Medical
and is expected to inflate at 8 to 9% in the next 20 years? Fair way to look at it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think because of the demand for education in India.
I think that would be important for our viewers to know that 8 to 9% is what education is going to be inflating at in the next 10 to 15 years at least.
Yes, absolutely. So that's one important goal where your inflation number has to be correct. getting a child married, which is another portion of one's important goals, has also inflated at about 10%.
Okay.
So it's important for you to not plan your child's marriage on the basis of 5% inflation. So 10% double-digit inflation on that. And for retirement, because what's going to happen is as you progress in life, your lifestyle would have progressed as well. So factoring in 9% inflation for retirement is important. So these are the three very, very important long-term goals for which inflation number has to be correct. See, inflation does not impact the short-term goals as much as it would impact the long run kind of
So
goals.
that's the starting point, right? You put your goals down, and of course, you've got to put a value against it. Feroz, we all know what the present value of goods and services are. So be it a holiday, be it a home, be it a child's education, it's easy to come to a number which is more appropriate in today's day and age. But like you said, once you inflate that by, say, 8 to 9% for education, how do you then arrive at a future value?
Absolutely. I think, like you rightly pointed out, it'll be easy for us to fathom what would I need today if I have to get my child educated. So once you have that, that's the important start point, and to get specific with your goals, which as we said, the survey clearly says whoever is more specific has a very large chance of meeting it. So if you have to be specific, first you have to start with what is the present value of your goal. For example, of a child's education, higher education, today costs about 18 to 20 lakh rupees in a good B school, for example. If that's your present value, but if your child is just 5 years old, he might just take another 15 to get that stage of getting to higher education. So 15 years from now, 20 lakhs would not remain 20 lakhs. So there are two important inputs. You could actually go to an Excel sheet, use a future value formula, and enter 2-3 simple input items and get the future value. And
just for the sake of our viewers, you can find that Excel sheet which has been provided by Feroz on the BTVI website. So the link of that website is flashing on your screen right now. So catch that. That will tell you, rather direct you to the Excel sheet on our website that could help you arrive at that future value of your goals. So you just want to take us through that while we...
Absolutely. So that already has had in key formulas, so makes life simpler. You have to put the present value of that goal, and it will automatically tell you. And if you have to also tell the Excel sheet what is the time frame of the goal, and it will automatically tell you what is the future value. The example which we took, 20 lakhs is the present value of a goal, and 15 years is the time frame of higher education for your child. Then 63 lakh comes out to be the value at 8% inflation.
Which is what 20 lakhs, and what education 15 years later is going to cost you, which is about 63 lakhs.
63 lakhs. So now we have arrived at the future value. Then comes the last step of trying to figure out what is the amount I'll need to invest to be able to get my 63 lakhs when my child is ready to be educated, higher educated. So 11,000 rupees is what you will need on a monthly basis, and that will automatically ensure at a fair growth of 12 to 13% will get you to 63 lakhs. So step 1, find out the present value. Step 2, tell the Excel sheet when do you need this money.
Which should be fairly easy to do.
Correct. That's very simple. And then once you key this in, you get to know what's the money needed at that point in time, which is 63 lakhs in this example. And then lastly, you will need to know what you need to save on a monthly basis to ensure that his higher education is taken care of. And when you do this math, it just works out to 11,000 rupees a month, which I think is an achievable number, especially today, right? When fine dines cost you a few thousand rupees. So 11,000 rupees invested for 15 consecutive years on a monthly basis will get you that 63 lakhs, which will help that person get the education which you envisage today, 15 years from now.
Right. So this brings me to an important question, Feroz, and I don't know if I'm framing this correctly, but we all know that your inflow or your salary is not unlimited. Your goals and aspirations can be unlimited. And versus a B school, you can look at a school internationally. So I guess aspirations can keep going up. In a case where your goals list is extended and you don't probably make enough or save enough to fulfill these goals or attribute your savings to, how do you work that out? Do you reduce the number of goals? Do you reduce the amount of money you're attributing, or you just spend lesser?
Correct. Like this Excel sheet has this prioritization listed. So if you put all your goals in the order of priority and key in what is the maximum you can save today,
It works backward.
It will work backward and allocate the money needed in the order of priority. So the Excel sheet on the first sheet tells you to key in all the goals you have, and once you key in and also tell the Excel sheet what is the maximum you will be able to save on a monthly basis, and then it will automatically allocate and not allocate money to the ones which are on the lower side.
And how important is discipline? Because I think most important, you can put all this together, but discipline and sticking to that plan is very important, right?
Absolutely. There are 62% SIP, systematic investment plans in India, which don't live the tenure they envisaged. This non-discipline actually cost them a lot of money, right? If you would have continued. So we calculated this for a few people who actually discontinued a couple of years, and then said whether you would have actually been able to meet your goals, and most often than not they would have met it if not for actually being indisciplined.
So with a little bit of effort in your today's time, you can of course have a very happy and wealthy future, and that's pretty much the conclusion of this conversation. Absolutely. Isn't it, Feroze? So yeah, make that effort, take the weekend off, put your goals down, monetize those goals. You can find the link on our page of how you quantify these goals, and of course then start working backward. And we can assure you, if you get down to doing this, you are bound to have a happier, wealthier, a more secure future, and therefore the importance of financial planning. We'll wrap up this edition on that note, but we'll come back next week, so stay tuned.